In the words of that famous tennis philosopher John McEnroe, you cannot be serious. I mean, trying to work out what the world of technology and the energy transition and EVs will look like in 2040 is going to be a mug's game, and it's going to make you look silly. But it's just for fun. And as I've probably mentioned before, in my working life, I was a product manager, so I was having to do forecasting. And then I spent a few years as an industry analyst, where that's all I did really was, looking at data. So, 3 to 5 years out, and, people will look at what you've done and take a view. 7 years out, you're really pushing it, and 10 years out, nobody takes you seriously. So 15 years. And I mean, I know that on a month by month and even a year by year basis, sometimes it seems that things don't really change that fast. But when you look across, say, a 15-year period, like I'm planning to do here, 2025 to 2040, then you realize, my goodness, how things do change. So anyway, welcome to Key Nero Diaries. A few months ago, I had a birthday which took me into the last year of my 7th decade. So big birthday next year. And it really got me thinking, gosh, 2025, we're a quarter of the way into the 21st century. When we were 3/4 of the way through the 20th century, 1975, I was in the second year of my apprenticeship at the time. So it's 1975, I'm working in this modern office with a lab attached to it, and none of the engineers have computers on their desk. Nobody has computers on their desks. Okay, the engineers, the older guys I work with, they all use slide rules. They would write up their reports, and they would hand them to a secretary who would type them up on an IBM electric typewriter. So this is 1975, and in fact I had a boss who was probably about in his mid-20s. He had a physics degree, and he managed to convince our department head to spend £300 or something, I think it was really expensive, on one of these newfangled Hewlett-Packard scientific calculators. Calculators were really expensive in those days. I don't know what £300 in 1975 would be equivalent to today. But anyway, so there we were, 1975, slide rules, no computers on anyone's desk, and we jump forward 15 years to 1990 in the time machine, when everyone has a computer on their desk. Okay, they're mostly dumb terminals connected to a computer room. There's no such thing as the internet. Well, there was, but I didn't know anyone on the internet. It was more still a specialist university, thing that universities, and again, I think it was it DARPA, the American military research laboratories were sort of working on it. But nobody I knew was on the internet. Nobody I knew had a mobile phone. Yes, the IBM PC had been launched in 1983, 84, that kind of time. And I'd spent most of those 15 years as a computer service engineer and also a project manager, working in France in the late 1980s. But as I say, it was all just mini computers, mainframe computers, and certainly no internet. So then we get back in the time machine and we jump forward to 2005. Everyone I know is on the internet. Everyone I know pretty much has a mobile phone. There's lots of laptops around now. The computing power has moved out of the computer room and onto the desktop. And what we've got in computer rooms is increasingly just server farms. Internet speeds are still quite low. You're lucky if you had sort of a 2 megabit circuit. Not many people had that. It was mostly 64 kilobit. But we'd gone in that time pretty much through the dial-up modem phase. The industry I was working in by then was telecommunications. So I saw incredible changes through the 1990s, but there was still no smartphones. And in fact, Steve Balmer, who was the CEO of Microsoft at the time, famously said that no one's going to want to access the internet from their phone, and no one's going to want to spend $1,000 on a phone. Well, I mean, Steve Ballmer's a billionaire. I don't suppose he's too worried about making the odd silly predictions. So then 2005, there were a few lithium-ion batteries around. Tesla had been founded in 2003, but they still didn't really have any product, but they were playing around with these newfangled lithium-ion batteries, which were just starting to be used in computers, but quite famously, a few of those burst into flames, and I think the technology was still in its infancy, certainly around the manufacturing processes that were used to make the batteries. So 2005, there are no electric cars on the world's roads, and we jump forward to 2020, and we've got 20 million electric cars on the world's roads by that time. And we know we're in recent times, so we can remember 5 years ago where we were. So we shift forward to 2025 and we look back at 2010. Now, in 2009, the Mitsubishi i-MiEV had been launched in July, and the Nissan Leaf was launched in Japan the following month, in August 2009. And then in 2010, the French clones of the Mitsubishi i-MiEV, I think it was called the Peugeot Ion and the Citroën C0, they came onto the market in 2010, and there were a few thousand electric cars on the world's roads, but it was just a rounding error, as was solar power, by the way. Solar power started off in Germany in the sort of early 2000s, when the German government were giving tax credits for building solar panels. I mean, Germany had quite a big solar panel manufacturing industry at that time. It wasn't all in China. And I remember reading in The Economist around that time that the price of silicon ingots had quadrupled in the space of about 18 months to 2 years, because of course, prior to the solar industry being a thing, most silicon ingots were used to make silicon chips. So there were only like 4 or 5 factories in the whole world that had the technology to make them. And of course, very rapidly, as soon as solar panels started to be produced, those number of factories increased hugely, and the price then came right back down, and it's far lower now, as we know. Solar panels are incredibly cheap. The base material for the panels are the silicon ingots. So there we are, 2010, electric cars are around in error. Go 15 years on, and oh my goodness, by the end of this year there will be 78 million electric cars on the world's roads. That is 5.3% of all the cars. And by the way, in 2010 we reached the 1 billion private cars on the world's roads. There's about 1.45 billion now on the world's roads. So in 15 years we've added about 450 million cars, but increasingly they're electric. So here we are, we're 2025. We're going to really push the boat out and try to think what it's going to be like in 2040. Well, so there's a little bit of time travel for you, not to 2040 or back to 1975, just 3 weeks. Before I finish the end of that video, both Mrs. Ina and I went down with COVID, so we were a bit poorly. And while I was in that state, I did think about this video and how it's got some kind of symmetry in time, in that 2025 is the same distance in time away from the millennium as 1975 was. And 1975, certainly to me, 50 years ago, when I was just sort of starting my working life, it's quite incredible how things have changed. And I hope doing these 15-year chunks has helped to illustrate how things do change over that time. But before I go forward to 2040 to finish this off, just want to go back briefly to 2010 in terms of EV battery prices. Now, on this chart you can see that these are global prices, by the way, at the pack level. So these are the prices that car manufacturers would have been paying for automotive batteries. And in 2010 it's around $1,200. and then by 2015 it's dropped to around about 400, and it continues to go down until we're at about $140. Now, obviously a lot of this depends on who was buying and where that person was buying. In China, things tend to be cheaper if you're actually making your cars in China, as of course a lot of EVs are made in China, even the ones that have Western brands on them. But anyway, it just shows how incredible that price reduction has been over the last 15 years. So that then leads me into 2040, because of course in terms of electric cars, the big thing that's going to affect the price and the performance are batteries. And obviously there are things we can say about the future where we have high levels of confidence, and then there are other things just outside of that where, like, we don't know what we don't know, where the confidence levels are much lower. So let's just deal with the high confidence stuff first. And I think we can say with confidence that battery technology is going to improve. Energy density is going to get better. There's going to be more different types of chemistry. I mean, my car is NMC, but already just with NMC, incremental improvements have added another sort of 25-30% to the energy density. And then of course you've got LFP, which is cheaper to make, more durable, and in fact more and more cars are coming out with LFP. And then we've got sodium ion now starting to go into mass production. Some people say that's just going to be for static batteries, but I think they'll find their way into cars as well, because again the technology won't stand still, and the materials that they're made of are a lot more abundant and cheaper than anything that involves lithium. And then of course you've got other marginal sort of adjustments such as silicon anodes, to anything to increase the energy density. And this is more for specific applications, high performance vehicles, maybe trucking applications, or ultimately aviation. I think that's where we're going ultimately with some of these very advanced batteries. And then of course there's the holy grail of solid state, and every year we say there's going to be some cars with solid state batteries in them. Well, I'm sure by 2040 they'll be quite common. Anyway, so that's the kind of things we can be sure of on the side of EVs. Any outliers? Well, in terms of things that could disrupt the march towards a totally electric car population, hydrogen, don't think so. I think we can be fairly sure we're not going to see hydrogen cars to any big extent unless there's some massive breakthroughs in the technology to make things simpler and cheaper. And then of course as regards internal combustion, there's going to be no magic developments, I don't think, that are going to allow the internal combustion engine to reverse its decline, which it has been in decline since 2017, which was the year of peak ICE, if you look at the data. Now, there are, of course, other outliers, and we're leaving aside things like war, pandemics, alien invasions. I don't know. I mean, there's loads of stuff that could happen in the world that could make all of this look completely relevant. But I think in terms of vehicles, then obviously the outlier in terms of total car sales is going to be Robotaxis. Now, back in 2010, when the world hit 1 billion private cars, the car companies and the oil companies were saying, oh yes, we're going to be 2 billion by this date and 2.5 billion by that date. Well, none of those numbers have come true. And this has been a result of demographics. There's more people live in cities where they use public transport. And the younger generation, for the first time in history, fewer and fewer of the younger generation are bothering to learn to drive. It's just too expensive. They've got too many other costs. And they've got mobile phones. So they use Uber and other taxi hailing services. And of course, if robotaxis really do become a big deal, as they're beginning to be in China, then will that reduce the total number of car sales and obviously proportionally the number of EV sales as well? Well, in a way, I hope it does, because those robotaxis, they're going to be electric, and So, it's going to effectively take more fossil fuel cars off the road and reduce our dependence on oil. But that, I don't really understand the way things are going with robotaxis and AI. I mean, AI is another complete outlier. In many ways, it's a kind of adjacent technology that relates to many, many things and could completely affect any kind of forecasts. And as I said before, forecasting 3-5 years out is okay. 7 years, you're pushing it a bit. 10 to 15, you're having a laugh. Anyway, so I hope you found that interesting. And of course, the other big thing that is even bigger than EVs is the way we power our world. And, the solar phenomena is just incredible. The growth is unbelievable. It's gone from like a rounding error to 1% of the world's electricity in 2016, 4% in 2020-21, 8% last year, and it's there's just no end to it because we're not going to run out of the raw materials. We're getting better at making them, and we're not running out of places to put the panels. So yeah, solar is going to be the biggest form of electricity by 2040, and it may even be the biggest form of primary energy as well, because of course as things shift to electric transportation and as we shift away from fossil fuel heating and industrial processes then and to electrical ways of doing that, then obviously solar is just going to become more and more important, together with grid scale batteries, of course. Anyway, I'm just about done. There's a bit of a marathon, but I hope you found that interesting, and you're all well and you don't get COVID. Until the next time.